Hello, friends, and welcome to yet another story session today. I have a bad cold, and I hope my voice doesn't sound very scary. Nevertheless, let's start today's story. So, the title of the story today is Hassan and the Crow. There was once a young man named Hassan who was very poor, so much so that he had to often go to bed hungry. One day, Hassan went out to the forest beyond the city and set up a trap, hoping to catch a bird or some small animal that would serve him for a meal. After setting it, he hid himself in the bushes nearby to wait. He had not been there long when he heard a loud flapping. He ran from his hiding place and saw that a large black crow was caught in the trap. Hassan was greatly disappointed. He had hoped for something much better for eating than a crow. However, even that was better than nothing. He took the bird from the trap and was about to wring its neck when the bird spoke to him in a human voice. "Hassan, Hassan, do not kill me. Spare my life and I will make you rich." Hassan was greatly surprised to hear the crow speak. But after a moment, he swallowed his surprise and answered it. "Make me rich?" he said. "How can you make me rich? You, a crow?" No, I am hungry, and the best thing that can happen to me now is to have you as my meal." Again he was about to wring the bird's neck, but it called to him so piteously that he paused. "Hassan, Hassan, you do not know what you are doing. I am no common crow. Let me go now, and when you return tomorrow to this same spot, you will find something in the trap that will be worth more to you than I can possibly be." "Very well," said Hassan. "I will let you go. But I do this through pity, and not because I believe in the least that you can better my fortunes." "Thank you," said the crow. "You will see, however, that I will keep my promise. But before you let me go, pluck 3 feathers from my wings. If you are ever in trouble, blow one of these feathers into the air and call me. I will come and give you aid." Hassan did as the crow bade him. He plucked 3 feathers from its wings, but as he did so, he could not help laughing. "You may laugh," said the crow, "but you will soon find that my promises are not vain. Tomorrow, when you return to your trap, you will find in it something that will be of value to you." Saying this, the crow spread its wings and flew away over the treetops, flapping heavily. Hassan returned home empty-handed and went to bed hungry once again. The next day he went to the forest again. As he approached the spot where the trap was, he gave a cry of joy and wonder, for caught in it was the most beautiful bird he had ever seen or dreamed of. Its feathers were of pure silver, and over them played the most gorgeous colors, like the colors of a rainbow. Its eyes shone like diamonds, and its crest was tipped with jewels of 7 different kinds. "Such a bird as this is not to be eaten," said Hassan to himself. "It is a gift that is fit for the king. I will take it to the palace and present it to him, and he will be sure to reward me handsomely." Hassan returned back to the city and borrowed a cage from his neighbor. Then he returned to the forest and put the wonderful bird in the cage and set out for the palace. He had thrown a piece of cloth over the cage so as to hide the bird, but the light from it was so bright that it shone through and set everyone wondering what it could be that the poor young man was carrying so carefully. At the palace, Hassan found that it was difficult matter to see the king. At last, however, he was brought before the king, and at once he uncovered the cage so that the bird could be seen. The king was filled with wonder at the sight. He had never seen such a bird before. He questioned Hassan and made him repeat again and again the story of how he had caught the bird, and exactly what it was that the crow had said to him. "There is some magic in this," said the king. "I will keep the bird, and I am so pleased to receive this gift that I will make you rich, just as the crow had promised you." The king gave Hassan magnificent garments, a beautiful house near the palace, plenty of slaves to serve him, and gold to spend. He also made Hassan a minister in his court, and very soon, because of his hard work and intelligence, Hassan became the king's favorite. But as they say, success is sure to make enemies. One of the king's minister, who had earlier been his favorite, became very jealous of Hassan, and he began to plot against him and win back the king's favor for himself. One day he went to the king and said, "What a pity it is that such a wonderful bird as Hassan has brought you should be kept in a cage. What it should have is an ivory palace, in which you could visit and sit at ease to watch it." "That is true," answered the king. "But I do not know how I could obtain such a palace. There is not enough ivory in all my kingdom to build such a thing." "It is plain enough," answered Hassan's enemy. "Hassan has some magic power. Ask him to build the palace, and if he refuses, threaten him with death. Then I am sure that in some way he will be able to provide it for you." This the wicked minister said, not because he believed it, but because he wished to destroy Hassan. After spending a short time in thought, the king agreed to his plan. He sent for Hassan and said to him, "I am, as you know, greatly delighted with the bird that you have given me. But now I wish for still another thing. I wish you to build an ivory palace in which the bird can live, and in which I can go and visit it." "Your Majesty, how can I build such a place as that?" cried Hassan. "I have nothing of my own. All that I have is what you have given me. Also, you know that in our kingdom there is not enough ivory to build a whole palace." "Nevertheless, you must provide for it," answered the king. "And if you do not do so, you will be put to death." When Hassan heard these words, he was greatly troubled. He returned home, and there he prepared to die, for he did not know where to find enough ivory to build one room, leave alone a whole palace. Suddenly, in the midst of his despair, he remembered the 3 feathers that he had plucked from the crow's wings. He feared they were lost, but after some search he found them, laid away in a corner with the rags he had once worn. He took them up, and blowing one of them into the air, he called upon the crow to come and help him. Almost at once he heard outside a heavy flapping of wings, and a large crow flew in through the window and perched beside him. "What do you wish?" asked the crow. "Why have you called upon me? Are you in trouble?" "Trouble enough," answered Hassan, "and trouble that may end in me losing my life." He then told the crow what it was that the king had demanded of him, and that he did not see how it would be possible for him to carry it out. "Do not despair over this," answered the crow. "It is not such a difficult matter as you seem to think. Ask the king to give you 40 cartloads of wine, with bullocks to pull them, and 40 slaves to drive the carts, and then you come away with me into the forest, and I may be able to get the ivory for you." Hassan had little hope, but he still asked the king for the things as the crow had bade him: 40 cartloads of wine, the bullocks, and the 40 slaves, which the king eagerly gave. Then Hassan went away with them into the forest, and the crow flew above to show him in which direction to go. After they had journeyed a long distance, they came to a pool, and all around this pool were marks that showed that it was the drinking place for a great herd of elephants. There had been a drought, however, and the water had almost dried up. The crow bade Hassan to fill the pool with the wine he had brought with him. Then, as per the crow's direction, Hassan hid himself, the carts, the bullocks, and the slaves under some bushes. Towards evening there was a loud noise of trampling and trumpeting in the forest, and a huge herd of elephants came down to the pool to drink. They were very thirsty. When they found the pool full to the brim, they trumpeted with joy and rushed to drink. They drank, and presently they were all overcome with the wine, and fell down and lay as though dead. Then Hassan called the 40 slaves, and they came and cut off all the elephants' tusks, and loaded them upon the carts, and left the forest before the elephants awoke. By next day they were back in the city again. When the king saw the loads of ivory that Hassan had brought with him, he was astonished. The wicked minister was filled with rage and envy. He publicly accused Hassan of possessing black magical powers, but no one paid heed to him. The ivory palace was built, and every day the king went there to sit and watch the bird, and Hassan was handsomely rewarded once again. But one day Hassan's enemy thought of a new plot to destroy him. He went to the king and said, "What a pity that such a beautiful bird as this makes no sound. No doubt it could make the most ravishing music if it were to sing." "Yes, it is a pity," answered the king, and at once he became thoughtful. "It may be that the bird misses its former owner," said the wicked minister. "If Hassan really wished to please you, he could find the former owner and bring him here so that the bird might sing again." "Yes, that is true," said the king, "and I would love to hear it sing." He then sent for Hassan and told him what he wished. "But, your Majesty," cried Hassan in despair, "I do not know who the owner of the bird was, nor have I any means of finding out. As you know, I caught it in a trap far away from the city." Nevertheless, the king was determined that Hassan must find the former owner of the bird and bring him to the palace. Hassan went home very sad. Then he remembered the crow's feathers. He took one of the two that still remained and blew it into the air and called the crow. Almost at once the crow appeared and settled on the ground beside him. "What is it that you wish now?" it asked. "Are you again in trouble?" "Yes, I am in trouble, and my trouble is very grievous." Hassan told the crow what the king demanded of him. "This is a more difficult task than the earlier one," answered the crow. "Nevertheless, it may be managed. You ask the king to give you his finest and most magnificent ship. The sails must be of silk, and it must be painted and gilded with real gold. There must be a dining hall covered with velvet curtains, and the dishes must be of solid gold. There must also be a bathroom with a marble bathtub, and there must be beautiful damsels on the ship, dressed in shining colours, with bracelets and anklets of gold and precious stones. Do this, and then, when the ship is ready, I will tell you what to do next." Hassan did as the crow bade him. He went to the king and asked him for the ship along with the necessary additions as the crow had asked. This the king gave him. When the ship was ready, Hassan went on board, taking the crow with him. They sailed away, and the crow guided Hassan in which direction to steer. After 7 days and 7 nights, they came within sight of an island. The island was very pleasant to look upon, for there were flowers and trees loaded with fruits. Also, the palaces in domes seemed beautifully done. "Look, Hassan," said the crow, "that is the place where we are going. Now listen carefully to what I tell you, for I can go no further. I must leave you here, but if you will follow my directions, everything will go well. That island belongs to the Queen of Paristan. She is a very powerful fairy, and very beautiful too. She is very curious as well. When she sees your ship, she will be anxious to find out about it. She will send her messengers to inquire about it. But you must answer no questions, and you must let no one but the Queen herself come on board. She will wish to go all over the ship, and when she sees the bathroom, she will admire it so much that she will wish to take a bath here. This you must agree to. Then, while she is bathing, you must sail away with her, for she is the owner of the Wonder Bird, and for her, and her alone, will the bird sing." Hassan promised to do exactly as the crow bade him. He ordered the captain to sail the ship up close to the shore of the island, and there they dropped anchor. People gathered on the shore to have a look at the beautiful ship. Many boats rowed over to the ship's side. In them were messengers from the Queen. These messengers questioned Hassan as to where the ship came from and to whom did it belong, as per the instructions from their Queen. But Hassan did not answer any of these questions. Neither did he allow them to come on board to examine the ship. "If the Queen wishes to know about the ship, she must come herself," said Hassan. The messengers returned to the shore dissatisfied. But soon another boat put forth from the shore, and in it was the Queen herself. She was rowed over to the ship's side, and she said to Hassan that she would come on board herself, along with her maidens. She was so beautiful and magnificent that Hassan hardly knew how to refuse her. However, he remembered the crow's words, and was determined to obey them. "Your Majesty, you will do me an honour by entering my ship," he said. "But as to anyone else coming on board with you, I cannot allow, for I was expressly forbidden to permit anyone but yourself to visit the ship." The Queen was offended by Hassan's words. Still, she was so curious that she could not resist coming on board to see whether the ship was really as splendid from within as it seemed from the outside. Hassan showed her the ship, and she was filled with admiration at the beauty and completeness of its furnishing. When she entered the room where the marble bath was, she was particularly delighted, and after examining all the arrangements, she told Hassan that she would like to bathe in the marble tub. Hassan at once retired and sent the damsels he had brought with him to attend the queen. While she was bathing, the sails were set, and the ship sailed away from the island and back across the sea towards Hassan's own country. When the queen had finished bathing, she was amazed to find the ship under way and the island already lost to view. She commanded Hassan to take her back to her island. He explained to the queen why it was that he had carried her off, and that was to save his own life. He said that later on, if she wished, she might return to her own country, but first she must see whether the bird belonged to her and whether it would sing for her. He also told her many pleasant things about the king, so much so that the queen became quite curious to see him. "I do not doubt from what you tell me," she said, "that the bird is one that I lost some time ago. If it is, I shall be glad to make it sing for your master. But after that I must return home, and I shall bring the bird back with me." Hassan doubted whether the king would agree to this, but he kept his thoughts to himself, and at last brought the queen to the city and into the king's palace. When the king saw the lady Hassan had brought with him, he was amazed at her beauty. He could think of nothing else. Even the bird was forgotten. The queen was also very pleased with him, and the two talked pleasantly together. "And now, your majesty," said the queen at last, "let us visit the ivory palace where the wonder bird is kept, and see whether it is mine, and if it is, I can promise you that it will immediately begin to sing, and that its voice is as beautiful as its plumage." The king at once arose, and together they went to the ivory palace. No sooner had the queen crossed the threshold, the bird burst into a song, and its song was so beautiful that all who heard it stood as though enchanted. They could not stir or breathe until the song ended. After the first day at the king's palace, the queen spoke no more of returning to her own island. She had fallen deeply in love with the king, and he with her. Before long they were married, and Hassan too prospered. Wealth and honours were heaped upon him, and there was nothing that the king and the queen were not ready to do for him. The wicked minister was filled with more rage and envy than ever. He could scarcely eat or sleep. He was so envious. Now, after the king and the queen had been married for some time, the queen fell ill, and her illness was so grievous that all the doctors in the kingdom could do nothing for her. At last it seemed as though she must surely die. When this became known, the wicked minister went to the king and said, "Your Majesty, I am but an ignorant man. I know you think nothing of me or my words. But is it not possible that there is some drug in the queen's own country that might cure her? And if so, why should we not send Hassan to fetch it for her? For he alone knows where her island lies." The king thought that the advice he received was very wise. He at once sent for Hassan and told him what he wished him to do. Hassan thoroughly understood how dangerous this errand might prove. He knew, too, why his enemy had suggested it, and that it was not through any love of the queen, but for hatred for Hassan. However, he said nothing to the king. He only agreed to what his master wished, and at once made ready to set out. First, however, he took out the third feather that the crow had given him, and blew it into the air, and called the crow to him. At once the crow appeared. "What would you have of me now?" it asked. "Has some new trouble come upon you?" "That I do not know," answered Hassan, "but the king is sending me upon a mission that may, it seems to me, prove very dangerous." He then told the crow what it was that the king required of him. The crow seemed greatly disturbed when it heard of the queen's illness. "You must go," it said, "and go at once. There is indeed a drug in the queen's palace that will save her life if you can fetch it in time. You will suffer no harm from the people in the palace. They will indeed give you the drug at once when they learn that the queen is in need of it. But at the gateway of the palace there are 2 fierce lions. They would certainly tear you to pieces before you enter, unless you had my help to depend upon." The crow then asked Hassan to look carefully at its right wing. "You will find there is a single silver feather," it said. "Pluck it out and carry it with you. When the lions spring at you, you must at once touch them with that feather, and they will become gentle, and you can pass them by unharmed." The crow stooped before Hassan and spread wide its wings, and Hassan saw that the third feather from the tip of the right one was of pure silver. He plucked it out, and having hidden it in a safe place in his clothing, he started out on his journey. For 7 days and 7 nights he sailed across the seas in the same direction as he had gone before, and on the morning of the 8th day he came within sight of the island. He landed and made his way towards the palace. He saw no one on his way. No sooner did he approach the gateway that 2 fierce lions sprang out and rushed at him, as though to tear him to pieces. Hassan was terrified at their appearance, but he stood firm until they were almost upon him, and then he touched them with the feather. At once they became perfectly gentle, and even fawned at his feet. Hassan passed by them unharmed and entered the palace. The people inside the palace were surprised to see a stranger enter. They could not understand how he had managed the lions. Hassan explained the matter to them and showed them the silver feather. He also told them the painful need of their queen and begged them if they had any drug that could save her. The people of the palace looked at him strangely when he showed them the feather. But when he made known the illness of the queen, they hastened to fetch a drug she always used and gave it to him. "This will save her," they told him, "for she has often used it to bring back life when it was almost gone." It was again 7 days and 7 nights before Hassan came to the end of the journey, and at that time the king was in despair. He no longer had any hope. However, when he heard that the ship had arrived, he sent his swiftest horses and riders to meet Hassan and bring him to the palace. Hassan was at once taken into the room where the queen was lying stretched upon a couch, seemingly lifeless. The king, the court physician, and her attendant were with her. "Have you brought it?" "The drug!" cried the king. Hassan took it out and placed it in the hands of the queen's physician. He did not notice that the crow had also followed him into the room. The physician poured a few drops of the drug into a goblet and held it to the queen's lips. No sooner had she swallowed it, a wonderful change came over her. The color returned to her cheeks, and life to her body. She opened her eyes and sat up and looked about her. At once her eyes fell upon the crow, and it was to it that she addressed her first words. "Oh, you careless and disobedient one!" she cried. "From what danger did you save your mistress?" "Alas!" answered the crow, "you have indeed been near to death, but all that is over now. There is only happiness before you. But for me, is my misery never going to end?" "Yes, it will end right now," cried the queen. "I owe my happiness to you. Come near me." All in the room had listened in wonder to this talk between the queen and the crow. But a still stranger thing was to happen. As the crow hopped close to the couch, the queen took a few drops of water from a vial nearby and sprinkled it over the bird. At once, instead of the crow, a tall and graceful woman stood there before the queen, a woman of such great beauty that she was as beautiful as the queen herself. The king and Hassan were filled with wonder at this sight. The queen then turned to the king with a gentle smile. "This woman," said she, "was my favorite of all the damsels that once attended me. But she grew proud and haughty because of my favor, and at last even started to disobey me. To punish her, I changed her into a crow and sent her to fly about the world, despised by all. But I will now forgive her because she brought me to you, and will take her back into favor if she can assure me of her repentance." The woman bent on her knees before the queen and kissed her hand, weeping. She assured her mistress that her pride was indeed broken, and that from now on she would be her faithful and obedient servant. The queen then raised her from her knees and made her sit beside her, and all was joy and happiness. As for Hassan, he found the woman so beautiful that he could not keep his eyes from her. He fell in love with her and longed to marry her. The woman returned his love, and with the consent of the king and the queen, they were married, and from that time onwards they lived in the greatest joy and contentment. As for the wicked minister, he was so miserable over the sight of Hassan's happiness that he could no longer bear it. He sold his house and goods and sailed away to no one knows where. So that brings us to the end of this story. I hope you enjoyed it and will let me know what you learned from it. Bye for now. But do keep listening to the White Canvas Stories.